How's it going, everyone? I'm Motive Games, and today we're going to be doing a continuation of a previous build. This is a mid-game update to our Gathering Storm Shaman build. A lot has changed, so if you haven't watched that build prior, I highly recommend going to check it out. The link will be in the description, and there should be a button to click in the top right of this video, because I'm going to be glossing over a lot of information. It will not be as in-depth as my videos normally are. To kind of give a big overarching idea of the changes, we have almost moved entirely away from spell damage. We're not looking to get as much spell damage as possible on these abilities, because now instead the whole idea is we're stacking frostbite and we can get insane. Up on bosses, the highest I've managed to get to is 800. This can get higher the more shock chance on hit we have, but we'll talk about itemization later. Just know that the build is almost entirely damage over time focused now, so spell damage no longer matters for us. So let's go ahead and talk about what's changed. So the first thing that's obvious is skills. See that we've no longer spec'd Fury Leap, and we've no longer spec'd Storm Crows. I'd stand by the decision to spec these in the beginning of the game, because flat can be very hard to come by at first, and this is just a very strong power spike, but we're at a point where this flat damage doesn't matter for one, and for two, since we're no longer really valuing spell damage, it does nothing. Went over to Warcry, which is a great skill, but I just don't like speccing it until we have enough points to actually make it work. For Warcry, we went with 2 points of Deep Roar, 1 point of Jormung's Wrath, and 5 points of Frostclaw. This gives us 250% cold damage every time we Warcry for 4 seconds, huge buff. We put 1 point into Bringer of Winter. This isn't actually that important. It gives us a chance to chill on hit, which just makes it so that enemies can get stuck in the tornado sometimes, even if they're not frozen. If you wanted to ignore this in lieu of an extra point of Breath of a Terror, then you can. From there, it's going to be 1 point to Staggering Roar, 1 point into Kinetic Scream, 2 points into Eviscerating Howl, and 1 point into Shallow Breath. We lose the stun and the freeze, essentially. We lose the freeze from Jormung's Wrath, but we have the cooldown of it, which means that we'll have the damage bonus up more often. And it's also going to be important for down here with Whirlpool, which will do 1 point Juggernaut, 1 point Breath, obviously. 4 points of Whirlpool makes it so that we no longer have to manually cast Maelstrom. So because of that, we just cast this, and boom, we have 4 stacks. With the half to cooldown, this is enough to stay at 8 stacks indefinitely. You just have to keep casting it, which you're going to be wanting to do anyways. There is that little period, I guess, where it falls off, but it's fine. So because of that, with Maelstrom, we've taken the points out of Lagon's Slumber. I currently have 4 points into Turbulence and 1 point into Gathering Storm, and only 2 points into Energized. I can see an argument for saying that you don't want to have Gathering Storm for an extra point of Energize, but I actually do enjoy having the chance to cast Maelstroms, because it's like this can add up considering the Maelstrom is longer than 2 seconds. I'll have a lot of situations where I'll have like 7 stacks of Maelstrom in between casts, so I would absolutely go ahead and grab that. Nothing's really changed in the Gathering Storm tree. We filled it out pretty much how we said we would. I'm at level 19. This last point is supposed to be in here. When you take gear off, it removes it from random places and does really messed up things to your skill trees, so just make sure you fill this out, and this is your whole 20 points. Tornado. So I stand by kind of what I said before when we were playing Tornado. I do really like picking up Charge Storm and then picking up Frequent Lightning. The main change I would make is second skills would be 1 point to Aspect and then 4 points in the Gust of Renewal, because casting double tornadoes doesn't matter if you can't constantly cast, right? If you're only putting out like 3 or 4 batches of tornadoes and you end up at 6 and you're done there, then like just being able to constantly cast Gust with thanks to Gust of Renewal is much more important. So we pick this up first and then we come to Hurricane. I am now using Druidic Control, but it's only because I have this chest piece that gives me +3 to Tornado. It's a very big upgrade, something that you absolutely should be looking out for. If I don't have a loot filter down in this video, which I should, that's one of the first things that you should make sure you mark, because you're looking for an exalted chest piece with +3 to Tornado. Yeah, we now have Druidic Control, so the tornadoes will stack on top of each other. The pull strength is nice, it's noticeable, and then cast speed, of course, is nice. It just means that we can get our damage out a lot faster. The interesting choice here is Spriggan Form. I think this is debatable. You could actually put a lot of different things here. Fury Leap was here before, but Spriggan Form is something that I've debated on thanks to a passive interaction we have, which is going to be here in the Druid tree. I've dipped into here for some survivability, picking up Chitonia's Plating for armor and endurance, and then here on Thicket of Thorns, we have a chance to cast Thorn Shield anytime we're hit, and Thorn Shield scales from the Spriggan Form tree. So we come down here and pick up Iron Bark, 3 points into Deep Roots to give it increased duration. So sometimes we'll have like 3 to 4 different stacks of Thorn Shield because it does stack. 5 points into a Terra's Bulwark to give us 100 flat shield, or 100 flat armor and 15% increased on top of what we're already getting, I put 3 points into bulb growth so that it has a chance to recast when it expires. So you can end up with a lot of shields, and this just helps our survivability a massive bit. From there, I put 4 points into Totem Warden and 4 points into Guardian Nature. I'm not really doing damage when I go to Spriggan Form. We'll talk about what its utility is. So I like just being able to put the totem down and have it heal me for a little bit of safety while we're kind of in like a down phase. So what is the purpose of Totem Form? Well, simply put, we're gonna go ahead and empty our mana here. And then now that my mana is empty, I'm gonna come over here and swap to Spriggan Form, and you'll see that I do have Rage that's going down, but in Spriggan Form, I can spam Thorn Shield, and the moment it's done, we swap back, and we have 144 mana. This means that over a 6-second cooldown period, we gained 140 mana, where with our mana regen, we would have only gained 60. This is a way to cheat our mana back up. If the more mana pool you have, the better this is. For a long time, the weapon I was using was this one, so my mana pool was 237, and don't worry about the stats on that weapon. I promise you we will go in depth in inventory soon. This is just a way for you to cheat mana back and just get your burst phase ready again. So currently what it's like is, you know, we're using Warcry, we're casting our tornadoes until we're out of mana. We use Spriggan Form when we have like a safe moment. We don't need to use mobility because once you use it, I have no mobility. Like I can't teleport anywhere. All I could do is put stuff down, put shields on myself, and then shoot useless thorns until that 6 seconds is up. And that's very important for some boss fights like Herod. Herod, if you go into Spriggan Form at the wrong time, will run away from you and you will just die to the storm. So you could try to do Tempest Form to get the mana gained on Gathering Storm hit. This only counts when you cast it yourself. So it's like, it's not gonna proc from Storm Bolts like most things would. You have to like smack them with Gathering Storm and a melee hit, and you'll gain 5 measly mana. If you get enough attack speed, it could be worth it, but that just feels like wasted points to me. So I'm not even gonna bother with that. I think the Spriggan Form is fine because honestly, it's not even that bad, because what we can do is just sit here and keep casting this, and you can see our armor is getting to like ridiculous levels. We can get up to like 10,000 plus armor, and then it starts like recasting itself, and when we go back, this all stays. I see no downside to this. So that's pretty much it for the skills. Not too much different other than the Spriggan Form and then the Warcry. So yeah, let's talk about the passive tree for a bit. As you can notice, we've cut almost all the spell damage. Like we said before, we're damage over time focused, so these things don't matter anymore. So because of that, we picked up points of Hunter Restoration, and then points of Tempest Bonds kind of stay here because we do like the increased cold damage, even though we don't have a minion. It's not that big of a deal. This is fine to me. If you wanted to drop this to put 5 points into Gift of the Wilderness, you could. 68 or 50 HP isn't like nothing. I don't think it's too insane. Moving over to Shaman, you can see we've cut a lot from Shaman. We still do have the attunement here in Shamanic Confusion because we want the pin. 8% penetration is pretty nice, and then we put 1 point to Sky Warrior. If you don't mind keeping up with totems, I think you could make the argument and say picking up Silent Protector would actually be better because that's a lot of armor, and the mana regen isn't nothing, but it ends up just being like something extra that I don't want to have to juggle half the time. Tempest Form, I thought was a very good pickup. This gives us shock chance on hit, and then we've also picked up Lagonian's Wrath. We don't care about the spell damage, but I do want the chance to cast Stormbolt when hit. 10 points into Windbringer gives us that 50% cold damage. I haven't decided to pick up Shattered Heavens or Hailbringer. I don't value freeze rate like this that much until you pick up a specific item, in which case we'll kind of talk about freeze rate later. But until we get to that point, which is going to be very, very in-game, I don't care about picking up too much of it. 5 points of Protective Circle. We don't put down a lot of totems, but when you're in Spriggan Form, you can put them down, and it can just give you like 45% physical resistance and elemental, which can be helpful in some cases. 5 points into Elemental Shrines. This is pretty much because we want the increased mana regen. We're not stacking attunement like we were, but we still have a decent amount, and because of that, our mana regen does get to a really nice point thanks to this skill. From there, Lagon's answer is just to get to Conflux, because Conflux is really the big payoff here. We get that 20% chance for indirect Stormbolt cast to cast again. It's a huge damage increase, so I think it's very important. From there, the Beastmaster tax is still paid. 8 points in Ursine, 5 Boarheart, 5 Call, or 2 Call, and then 5 Porcelain Constitution. This is just really nice defensive cluster. You can't beat it. The rest of the points are gonna be going into Druid. We're gonna start with Chitonia's Plating. 7 points there gives us 14% endurance and armor. 3 points into Blessed Springs gives us a little bit of cold damage, and then 5 points into Thicket of Thorns, so we have that chance to cast Thorn Shield on hit. Very important. 20% armor is also really nice too. Any leftover points from here, I'm just gonna put into River Sprites. We do really want to pick up that 5 points so we can get the Frostbite chance, or at least I do now. Frostbite chance is just what most of our damage comes Maelstrom, so 40% of it's pretty nice. Cold damage isn't helpful, and then I'm not gonna like be mad because I get freeze rate on top of it. You know, there's just nothing wrong with anything in this tree. I don't feel like there's anything else in this tree that's actually too helpful for us. We're just in here for defenses. Even Primordial Rage I don't feel like is that helpful, so I've picked up everything that I feel like I can, and then once this is filled out, we will basically be done. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about itemization for a bit. As you can see, not too much has changed. We're wearing Exaltants in almost every slot. Some of them are very different. So like this is a pair of boots that I picked up, great with hybrid health. Could not ask for anything better. Maybe a slightly better base, but these are pretty great. For individual items, I will have the build planner of what exactly I'm wearing down in the description. You can also search up my character at any time by typing in my username and then the name of my character. The name of this character is MOTF Shaman. So you can always pull up whatever it is that I have on this character at the time, if perhaps you wanted to peek in and see if maybe I'm doing anything different at the time. The big two upgrades right now are going to be Frostbite Shackles. This is best in slot gloves. You want to pick them up as soon as you can. They are a rare drop from a boss. The boss is the Monolith here at Bloodfrost and Death. It is rare, so it's like it's going to take you a few attempts to actually get it. If for whatever reason you feel extremely frail, you don't feel like you're clearing well because you're dying all the time now, I would almost recommend swapping to Merchant's Guild, especially if you don't have any gear that's tied to Circle of Fortune, and then going ahead and just buying a pair. This is one of the key pieces that's going to start keeping you alive. The ward gain on freeze is actually quite a bit. We'll stack upwards to 1,000, almost 2,000 in some cases, ward just going through the map. Just because we're freezing so damn often. Another thing is the frostbite increase duration is massive for a damage increase. We get 130% frostbite on hit. This can roll like pretty wildly, so to speak. Like 100% to 140% is not the worst in terms of range, but it is a big difference to get a high roll versus a low roll, especially on duration. So this one is kind of like a low roll except for in duration, and then the ward on freeze is pretty nice, but just try to pick one up if you can. If you have to buy it through merchants, you can keep doing the boss until you get your own drop, and then you can go back to Circle of Fortune. Otherwise, just stick on Circle of Fortune until you get it. Maybe you'll get lucky, who knows. The second big one's going to be Snowdrift. Now, there's a catch with Snowdrift. It's a damage boot. So you normally, at least in my version of how I play this, are using your boots for defenses. So we're giving up a defensive slot for an offensive piece. If you can get Snowdrift with 2 to 3 LP, maybe even 4, because it's a low level item, it is possible, but rare, you can put defensive lines on it. So as you can see here, I attempted to put, I put 27% increased armor. If I could get a 2 to 3 LP Snowdrift, I would basically throw these boots on them and just hope that I get everything except the dodge rating. There are times where I take this off, and that is against bosses where I am very familiar with their mechanics. Because if I know that I'm just not going to get hit, or that I can avoid one shots and I know the damage I'm going to take will still be survivable, this is just a free damage upgrade. I would not wear this when I'm running through monoliths, however. On that note, so normally we use this wand. It does have nice freeze rate multi, so it does pair with it, but I have this wand set aside for the times where I wear Snowdrift, because this has an exalted freeze rate multi on it. It does, in theory, have less percentage damage, so it should be, you know, a damage decrease, but because there's so much freeze rate multi on this that's being converted to pin, it is actually like significant damage increase, somewhere around like 15 to 20% after all the calcs are done. Now the second big one, this is actually going to be a pair of 2 different ones. So you have Bleeding Heart and Tome of Elements. You want one of these on your build. I personally think that Tome of Elements is ideal. Either one you're going to use has to be 2 or 3 LP with good lines on it. So in this case, we do have the 2 LP Bleeding Heart, has chance to shock on hit and damage over time. This was pretty ideal roll for me, so we're using this one for now. And then maybe if I can get a 2 to 3 LP Tome of Elements, I will swap them out and then put something else on, just like this Infernal Gold element, you know, because it can give some resistances, which would free me up to swapping out other things around. As you can see, my resistances are kind of rough. I have really low poison resist and void resist. However, because my effective HP is so high between my armor, my endurance, and how high of an HP I have, I am still pretty tanky. So even through poison and void damage, I'm often pretty safe, and you'll probably see some of that whenever we're going through monoliths. This idol is Throne of Ambition. You can get this from the boss at Stolen Lance, I believe. Once you kill him, he has a chance to drop it, and it is pretty decent. It'll give you 40% cold damage and 40% more armor, especially during bosses. This can be very helpful. But outside of that, itemization just hasn't changed too much. We are focusing on shock on hit as our primary suffix and cold pen on our weapons, and then increased elemental damage over time, and then either increased cold damage or increased damage over time. I think they should be equal, as long as you're just not picking up elemental damage. That should be the weakest line possible. For defenses, same as we said before, you want to pick up hybrid health on your boots, and then I believe it can roll somewhere else. And then you just want to try to pick up as many like varied defenses as possible. Don't just go all into resistances. I promise you, you will not be as tanky as if you also try to throw in armor, crit reduction, other things like that on there. The other thing I really want to go over is blessings, because there are some important ones for this build. Actually, we didn't talk about blessings before because it's something people start to pick up as they get towards in-game. The first one is going to be Grand Survival of Might. You can get this at Reign of Dragons. This is a generic blessing. You should put this on most builds you play. If you're doing empowered monoliths, this can roll between 50 to 70%. 70% crit avoidance basically just means you need one item that has crit avoidance on it and you're good. You don't have to worry about being crit again. Next big one is going to be Ending the Storm. You can get chance to shock on hit from this. It's very helpful. There's also just a lot of generally other good ones in here. Like you can get increased cold damage, lightning resist, ward per second, and chance to gain ward on hit. A lot of these are just like, they'll help. Shock duration could be very good once we get a very high amount of shock on hit. It could be worth swapping around, and I will experiment on that. This is what I've settled on at the moment. The last one is going to be the Age of Winter, and I think this is the most important one. At the Age of Winter, we can get chance to shred cold resistance on hit. This is actually very hard to find for this build. So I think this is premier. You want to pick this up and you want to try to get this as max roll as possible, because every bit of cold resistance we're bringing down means that we'll do more damage. Very similar to Pin. I think that it's just one of those things we should prioritize. There's not much else in here either that I would say that we want to pick up. You can pick up cold resistance, you can pick up Fizz, but increased armor actually is probably one of the only other ones that I would consider, because 55% is pretty substantial. I just think that there's no reason to not pick up Grand Age of Winter. For the rest of them, it's not too big of a deal, because most of these are going to be things like a little bit of health or like just increased drop rates. So for instance, I currently have it set to be increased wand drop rate on Blood, Frost, and Death. This way I can just seed through and find more weapons that are actually viable for me. All right, so now let's look into doing some maps real fast. As you can see, I'm at 165 corruption. Not that high, but it's still pretty decent for considering it's a build that a lot of people try to say isn't viable. A lot of people think that Shaman is one of the worst classes in the game, but especially considering the game got harder, I think 165 to 170 is around the baseline for saying that like this is a viable build. So as I said before, you're just going to be spamming war cries, walking along. You can jump where you need to. You're going to see a little bit of lag occasionally. My PC isn't the best, so especially on these builds where I'm going to be doing a lot, dropping a lot of animations, there's some stuttering, you know? It's the life we live as poor people. It doesn't help, especially when I'm recording. So if this bothers you, sorry. I do have some better footage that I'll roll at different parts. But yeah, it's just kind of walking around. You drop this, just everything will die as you go by. You can see our ward is sitting around like 1300. There's very little we actually have to do. So now we're coming up to here. We have to start the gate. I'm gonna go ahead, start it, shift into Spriggan, cast some thorn totems or some thorn shields on myself, and then we transform back, and now our mana's back. So let's go ahead and focus on killing. We don't want to have to do that again, so we're gonna be a little more conservative with our drops of Tornado. Just dropping like 1 or 2 on bigger enemies, making sure we're placing them where we know the enemies are going to spawn. It will kill them eventually because of how long they last and how long the duration of the ailments lasts as well. There's not too much that I have to do. Standing close to the enemies can also make them die a little bit faster, as we do have Spriggan Form, we do have Maelstrom constantly casting as well. But yeah, we took it a little slow. This could have been much faster if I was willing to go Spriggan Form a second time, but so be it. All right, let's go ahead and run another one. And then after this, we'll do a Shade of Orbis so that you can kind of see what bossing is like. Let's go ahead and do this. I'm gonna drop some tornadoes before he comes out. Wait a second, because they normally will teleport. He didn't, so we're gonna drop more. And then that's it, he's dead. There's no reason to sit around. You can see what his drop is, just in case. Let's see. Intelligence, necrotic resistance, some fire resistance on this, not the best. We'll ignore that and move on with our day. Oh, I need to be going up. The build can be a little boring, I guess, in the sense where it's like you're only ever doing two things. We're just jumping around, but I think that's kind of the nature of the beast with these builds. Once we get things to be auto-casting, you're just limiting how much you have to do. Okay. Do a little bit of mob control here, and then now I'm gonna go ahead and just drop everything on him. He should be dead. All right, so we're gonna take these. And let's do that boss now. Loading into the Shade of Orbis here, you always want to make sure and check which ones are going to be better. So like for instance, these are coming from the same node, so you would assume they have the same reward. This one, however, has 5 corruption as a reward, and this one has 7. So we're going to go for the one with the better reward. As I said prior, I go into these, I'm very familiar with these kind of bosses loadouts, so I'm going to go ahead and swap my gear. Let's get started. Go ahead and start dropping now because you don't want to do it immediately. He's lightning, so I'm going to drop a totem so that I have a little bit better lightning resist. Okay, we want to avoid the I-beams. I'm going to drop a tornado at each of them. Let's not stand in the way of that. Now I'm going to transform. Let's put down a totem, start casting shield on myself. Oh, that was very close, actually. Okay, transform again. Totem. Start casting shield. Avoid the beams. Nice of us. Nice of him to teleport back into our tornadoes. And then this should pretty much hit. There's no reason to go back to Spriggan because we could just drop a few more and kill him. But yeah. Pretty simple. The build I don't think is anything too hard to play, which is pretty much a positive. This is my rendition of Gathering Storm Shaman. Going forward, the only thing I'll really be looking for is more legendaries, but there's a lot of them that I just really don't care for. I think one of the only legendary ones that we could even want is going to be like, what is it called? Mad Ladle of the Alchemist with almost most of these lines on it. So our options are very limited. But yeah, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and a comment down below. If you want to be more involved in the process of these videos, feel free to join the Discord channel, which will be in the description. I often ask for feedback on what kind of builds people want to see, so could be a good place to, you know, leave that feedback. And then of course I stream live on Twitch where I've been playing this build along with a few others. Anyways, hope you guys liked the guide. I'll see you next time. Peace.